when it comes to bipartisanship, will Democrats ever stop getting the short end of the stick? Hey, girls and guys, I'm Brandy with an I, and this is Did You Hear the News? Well, welcome back to the government. So the drama part 115,000. What a week. I say that every week, but like, seriously, what a week. I don't even know if we're coming or going at this point. I just don't even understand why Democrats keep trying with Republicans. Like, it's just starting to get embarrassing now. I'm starting to be embarrassed for them. So this week, the president continued trying to reach bipartisan agreements with Republicans on a plethora of things, including his infrastructure plan, in which he has now announced that they will be counteroffering a new plan of about 1.7 billion, which is down from 2.2 billion, which is what they originally wanted for the infrastructure bill. So basically, President Biden has agreed to kind of drop the items in the bill, such as research and development and manufacturing, and then try to put those in separate bills later and just focus on what Republicans are screaming is infrastructure, which is roads, bridges, broadband. In this counteroffer, he has cut the amount of money for broadband, acknowledging that he feels like he can still get the things he wants done for broadband. It would just take longer. He's also cut money to roads and bridges. Like, he just basically kept what they said they thought was infrastructure and then took some of the money out of it. Of course, Republicans still are not happy. If you recall, I think their counteroffer was like 800 billion in opposed to 2.2 trillion. So that 1.7 trillion to them is still much higher than they want to go, which is once again confusing, because when the former president was in office and he was talking about infrastructure, he was talking about trillions of dollars as well. But we all know how Republicans are. As soon as the Democrats get into any kind of power, it's like, no, we can't spend that much. Why would we ever want to help people? And so, of course, they're not down with this counteroffer. It's not surprising at all. They still do not want to raise taxes. Like, that's their red line. They're completely against it. They don't want it. Instead, Republicans want to charge user fees, which is basically a fancy way of saying regular citizens. So that means you would see increase like toll prices, and they want to do like a tax on, like a gas tax, or like a tax on those with electric vehicles. Like, why are you trying to tax normal people when corporations and millionaires and trillionaires are right there? I don't get it. And we're not talking about taxing them more. We're talking about taxing them in general. They don't pay taxes. Just collect taxes from them. Get rid of the loopholes in which they don't have to pay taxes, and just make them pay their fair share of tax. I don't know how many times I can say it, but I'm going to keep repeating it. It doesn't make sense for you to raise taxes on normal working class people, but not corporations who are making billions and trillions of dollars. Why? Republicans, what do you have against normal working class people? I need to know. And then you want to brand yourself, as hard as Ted Cruz may try, as the party of the working class. But you'd rather tax us and not the corporations. The math ain't mathing. It just ain't mathing. So who knows how that's going to go. There's going to be a lot of back and forth with this bill if Democrats and President Biden continue to try and do this bipartisan thing with Republicans who continue not to argue in good faith. Like, I don't even see why they're trying at this point. I mean, I don't know if they're just trying to exhaust all their options before they look Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin in the eye and say, I told you so. Like, I don't know, but like it's now everybody's anxious. Like, it's giving everybody anxiety because it's like, how many times do they have to like spit in our faces before we decide, hey, like, it's time to grab the reins. Like, it's time to pretend like we're actually the party that's in control here. And I know that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer really want to fight this week because one of the biggest deals this week was the fact that Republicans in leadership, that would be your Kevin McCarthy, your Steve Scalise's, your Mitch McConnell's, came out in opposition of the 1-6 commission to investigate the insurrection. Now, if you guys recall, they announced that they wanted to do this commission months ago. Okay, Kevin McCarthy said, oh no, like the way Nancy wants to do it, we don't want her to do it. Like, and then he put John Katko in charge of negotiating with Benny Thompson. John Katko's a Republican, Benny Thompson's a Democrat. He put him in charge of, negotiating with the Democrats on what they wanted. Kevin McCarthy gave like 3 specific asks. He wanted there to be equal members appointed by Republicans and Democrats. Nancy was like, okay, sure. He wanted to make sure that when they called witnesses, whoever is the chairman and then the vice chairman or co-chairman, they would be the ones who would approve the witnesses. So they'd either have to both approve, or if they didn't, a majority would have to approve. So imagine this. There's 10 people on the board. Republicans get to choose 5. Democrats get to choose another 5. None of these people are in Congress. They have to be outside of Congress. Then the Democrats get to choose the chair. The Republicans get to choose the co-chair. The co-chair and the chair have to agree on who is called as a witness. If they can't agree, a vote is taken. Majority rules. Like, that's basically it. And then on top of that, they get to choose, like, they get to have like their own like offices, and they get to appoint committees, all this stuff that Republicans will tell you they can't do in the bill. But their own Republican, John Katko, got up in the Congress on the House floor and said, that's not true. Everything that they've said is not true. Nancy Pelosi gave Kevin McCarthy everything he asked for. And then he was like, no, I'm not going to support it. And then they'll tell you, well, I'm not going to support it because we don't think that you should only look into what's going on with what happened on 1-6, but you also need to look into the events of the past summer, 2020. Remember when George Floyd got killed and there was uprising in the streets? Yeah, that's the one. He wants you to look into that. Now, I don't understand why. That doesn't have anything to do with 1-6. Like, we all know. That has nothing to do with 1-6. Like, of course, sure, if you want to look into what was going on the past summer when there was unrest, when there were some things going on at, public buildings such as in Portland and the courthouse. Okay, cool. Make another commission for that. But this is about 1-6. This is about the insurrection. This is about the lies that led to a group of people feeling as if something was being stolen from them, and then a former president telling them to basically go march on the Capitol. Nobody approves of it. Nobody in Republican leadership approves of it. And now it's like we might not even have it at all. Because it passed in the House, of course. There's a majority of Democrats in the House, so that was expected. But then there were also 35 Republicans that voted for it in the House. And of course, like now, Republicans are taking aim at those 35 because, you know, heaven forbid anybody really want to look into what actually happened that day. Like what actually led up to it, what actually could have been done better, what the current president was doing while it was all going down, why there were windows and gaps in the time between the officials asking for help and then actually getting help. Like, there are so many things that are unanswered. And Republicans say, oh, well, it's counterintuitive. It's duplicitous. We already have other commissions and or investigations into it. And it's like, no, none of those are going to be doing what this commission would be doing. This commission would be, once again, an outside group who would be responsible for looking into it, just like 9/11. Just like 9/11, an outside group of people who would look into what happened that day, piece it together, and to try to determine why there were failures and how to basically make them better. Here's the issue. Republicans know that they would be implicated in a lot of this, right? It's not like 9/11 when it was like an outside influence or group or terrorist group and they took these actions and they did on their own. And what could we as Americans from before Bush on, to his administration, what we could have done to, make things more secure, and why we now have such stringent TSA checks where you can't take a whole bottle of hair gel on a plane. Like, what could we have done better? That's what the commission would do. But the Republicans are saying, no, it's strictly political and it's political. No, the point is you wanted it to be equal. It didn't have to be. Once again, I know it doesn't seem like it, but Democrats are in the majority. Not only in the Senate, but in the House as well. And it didn't have to be even. But that's a concession that Nancy Pelosi gave because the Republicans were crying foul. Oh, you can't have more members than we, even though Democrats are in the majority. So how are you going to argue that it's partisan when it's going to be, once again, a bipartisan group? You have equal say who you want to choose. Democrats have equal say who they want to choose. Everything is pretty much 50-50. But Republicans know that a lot of them are going to be implicated. Like, Kevin McCarthy knows that he is very likely to be subpoenaed to give a testimony about that phone call that occurred that day based on the statement from Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler, who said that Donald Trump was on the phone with Kevin McCarthy, and Kevin said, hey, we need help. And Trump was like, no, that's Antifa. And Kevin was like, no, these are your people. You need to call them off. To which former President Trump said, well, Kevin, I guess they're more upset about the election than you are. And he knows he's going to have to answer to that, because what happens? Since that information has come out, he has been completely mum about it. He won't talk about it. He pretends like it didn't happen. And he knows that under oath, he would have to answer questions about that phone call. And he doesn't want to. And other Republicans don't want to have to answer to the fact that they were the ones who were continuing to lie about the election, to the point that their ridiculous followers believed their lies and stormed the Capitol. It's like the call is coming from inside the house. Like, we know it. We know it. Like, you don't have to pretend like it was a normal tourist visit. Like, we saw it happen. We have pictures and videos. It's a slap in the face, especially to the Capitol Police officers who wrote a letter to Republican leadership and were saying how disappointed they were that, number one, they're downplaying what happened on that day, pretending like it was just love and peace and they were holding hands and braiding each other's hair. Like, these men had to fight for their lives for hours. For hours. Mitt Romney was that close to running into a mob. And if you don't think that those people would have captured anybody they could find that day, then we didn't watch the same events. And it doesn't matter if they probably thought that they were on Trump's side or not. They would have captured any congressman or woman that they could find. And Mitt Romney would have definitely been in trouble because he's been against Trump from jump. So how are we now acting like it was just another day at the farm? It's insanity. It's absolute insanity. And to think that the Republicans would rather just try to sweep it under the rug than let it happen because they think it's going to affect the midterms that are coming up. And I can tell you why they think that. If you don't recall, I think it was the first episode of this podcast when I talked about the insurrection and everything that went down. I also mentioned Benghazi because I knew we were going to be here once again, where Republicans were going to pretend like it was no big deal. Nobody even needed to talk about it. We all needed to move on. But they investigated Benghazi numerous times. Hillary Clinton had to testify for hours at more than one hearing about Benghazi, when 4 people in Benghazi, not even on U.S. soil, were killed. Unfortunately, it was a very unfortunate situation. But 4 people were killed. And Hillary Clinton was, drugged through the wire for like 2 years. Investigation after investigation after investigation, led by Republicans, to the point where she had to basically get in a hearing and make them all look silly. More than once. And then Kevin McCarthy, who at the time was running for Speaker of the House, got on the news and basically said, oh, well, everybody thought that Hillary was, the one to beat and she was so strong and she couldn't be brought down. But look, we had an investigation into Benghazi and look at her numbers today. To which everybody was like, oh, that's the quiet part out loud, huh? To which he basically had to say, I'm sorry, like, that's not what I meant to say, blah, blah, but ended up having to take his name out of the running for Speaker of the House. Because that's the jig. That's the jig. You know why you did it. You know what happened when you did it. And now you don't want the same thing to happen to you. But unfortunately, we got the receipts. We just have the receipts. And it's like now, I think the other part of the jig is that so Republicans are saying, no, we don't want this commission. We don't know how this is going to go in the Senate. They haven't had the vote yet. They, as far as we know, don't have the support because they'll need 10 senators. They don't know if they'll have the support of the senators who voted to convict the former president during impeachment. Like they just don't think they'll have the 10 votes, right? What can be done is, one, the current president, Biden, can open his own type of commission. Once again, that's going to be seen as partisan. Number 2, Department of Justice can open one. Merrick Garland can say, okay, well, here we go. Let's open this one. And then back off and let them do what they do. Because once again, independent. Or Nancy Pelosi, as Speaker of the House, with Democrats in the majority, can go, hey, we'll set up our own commission led by our own committees, because once again, majority, that means Democrats would probably be the higher number on the committee, and then there would be the chairs of the committees. They can do that. They can have their own investigation. Once again, no matter how it's done, Republicans aren't going to cry. It's a partisan attack. It's the Democrats just trying to attack us. And it's just like, for people who saw what happened, they'd be like, no, somebody needs to get to the bottom of this. But to people who only watch Fox News and don't really get their news from anywhere else besides ON and Newsmax, they're going to be like, yeah, it's a witch hunt. It's another witch hunt. Why can't the Democrats just leave the Republicans alone? Like we didn't see members of the Capitol Police being beat down with anything they could get their hands on. Tased repeatedly. Sprayed with bear spray. We did not watch people literally break into the Capitol. Girl, it's tiring. It's tiring. So that's why I just feel like, why are we trying to work with Republicans? We already see they don't operate in good faith. We already see that they'll do anything they can to sweep the events of January 6th under the rug. We already see that even if they're not afraid of the former president, they're going to unite with him for the sake of getting votes. Because they have determined that those who favor the former president are necessary for them to win. It's necessary for their careers as Republicans in the House and the Senate. And that's very unfortunate, because that means, unfortunately for us, we're going to have conspiracy theorists and people who refuse to just accept the truth and the fact that the election was not stolen, that President Biden is the literal president. He's not in front of green screens in a bunker pretending to be the president. He's the actual president. I don't even know how one can believe that. The man has left the White House, but these people think he's on a Hollywood set pretending to be the president. These are the people that we have to coexist with, coincide with. These are the people that are voting for people in their districts who play up their crazy, their conspiracies, and then they put them in the House, and then we have to deal with them. And that's how we get Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Lauren Boeberts and Madison Cawthorn. That's how we get these people. And then the senators who are supposed to be on an even higher plane are just playing into it too. Ted Cruz is continuously terrible. Same as Lindsey Graham. Give us a break. Give us a break. Even Mike Pence's brother, who I was this week years old when I found out he's actually a congressman in the Congress. I had no idea. But Mike Pence's own brother voted against the commission to investigate 1-6. Now, I don't know if they had a family meeting and Mike was like, listen, I ain't even worried about that. I'm just trying to run for president. Do what you do. Do what you got to do for your own self. I don't know if they had a meeting, but I find it very strange that you would vote against the commission to investigate the day in which people came in to legit kill your brother. Not only that, but Mike Pence's brother was with him when he had to forcefully be evacuated. And not force like they had to force him to, but like how they had to very seriously evacuate this man from the Capitol because people were yelling, "Hang Mike Pence." But he voted against the commission. I don't really know, once again, what they agreed upon, but all I gotta say is I got beef with my brother or my sister if they're not voting to investigate the people that try to kill me. We got beef. And then you have Marjorie, insane in the membrane, Taylor Greene, getting up and saying, well, what about BLM? And what about Antifa? And they're the real problem. And they're dangerous terrorists. And they get treated better than the people that trespassed and broke into the Capitol because they won't be released. And they're being held. And I'm like, girl, I don't even know what to say. Like, I don't even know what to say to that. Like, I don't even know why BLM and Antifa, like, keep coming out your mouth. Like, we're talking about 1-6. We're talking about people who were talking about killing congressmen and women. I don't care if they ever get out. Honestly, truly, that's me. I don't care if they ever get out. Do I think they should be in solitary confinement? I don't know. Why were they put there? I need more details. I need to understand what's going on. I need more details. I don't like to make rash decisions without more details. But I guess I'd have to assume there's a reason they're in solitary confinement. That's what I have to guess. Here's the thing. I don't think we're ever going to get down to what happened that day. And that's really sad. Like, that's really sad because it literally played out like on TV in front of our very eyes. And we literally have congressmen and women trying to tell us that our eyes are lying. So don't believe your lying eyes. It was a beautiful day. Even though you can see like legit pictures and videos of like the same people saying it was a normal tourist day, literally shocked and terrified and trying to barricade the doors so these normal tourists couldn't get into the house floor. It's like, me and Mitt Romney want to know if y'all are embarrassed because it's embarrassing. It's so embarrassing. What's even more embarrassing is that we still have this Arizona audit going on. And if you recall, I told you guys a couple weeks ago, the Arizona audit was taking place at a Coliseum, which, no lie, was sharing a parking lot with the Crazy Times Carnival. Because isn't that so fitting? This audit is taking place by a security team, a right-wing security team out of Florida, if I'm not mistaken, because of course, called the Cyber Ninjas. And so they are the ones who are basically funding this ridiculous audit that Arizona Republicans were like, sure. And then it started getting crazier and crazier, and they were like, listen, this is a waste of time at this point. Like, now you're making a mockery out of us, and this is just ridiculous. They have people in the audits that don't know anything about auditing elections. They just showed up, basically, and because they believe that the former president was defrauded out of election that basically qualified them. These people were using, once again, UV lights to search for bamboo particles in the paper because they believe that China shipped ballots over here and watermarks, apparently, because of course if you're going to do fraud on ballots, you're for sure going to leave a watermark on it. And then it started getting even crazier, like, not to mention the fact that it's taking place, like I said, at a coliseum. And so graduations are coming up. So now they're having to pause going through these millions of ballots, to which they've only done, I think, like a few thousand. They have to pause and put the ballots away because graduations are going to be taking place at this coliseum. And then on top of that, they were also saying something to the effect of there was like a chicken farm or something that had a fire, and they were saying that the chickens had ate the ballots and they were being incinerated. I wish I was lying, but I'm absolutely not. That's absolutely what they have been spreading. And then on top of that, the former president made ridiculous claim that the database was being cleared and deleted and they couldn't find any of the files or whatnot. To which at this point, the new Maricopa County recorder was like, listen, we're not going to do this. So then he had to get on Twitter and be like, I'm literally looking at the database on the other screen of my computer. Like, can we not play these games? Can we not play these games? Then, of course, he had to go on all the news outlets and be like, listen, I didn't even want to have to do this. Like, these are my first interviews, and I got to come out and be like, we want to be I want this to be a boring role. And I can't even have that because of the shenanigans that are going on. Like, at this point, most of the Republicans are like, okay, like, the thrill is gone. But now, as was feared, this has opened crazy doors into other states. And so now, there's another audit that a judge just approved for Fulton County, Georgia. If you recall, Georgia went blue for the first time since like 1992, which was a shock and surprise to most of us. But shout out to Black voters, which is why Fulton County is getting looked at super hard. If I'm not mistaken, that is the county where like Atlanta is. So you already know the vibes. And so they're now doing another audit into these votes. If you don't recall, Georgia had like 3 audits. Okay, they did a full hand count audit, right? They had done 2 audits before the former president was like, well, now we're going to have you to do another one because it was so close. I think for Georgia, if it's within like 0.5 of a point or something like that, the person who lost can request a recount. So of course, that's what he did. I don't recall if it was a partial recount or it was a full recount, but I do recall that they had to hand count before this, before he even called for a recount. They had to hand count millions of ballots. I think it was like 2 million ballots that they had to hand count. They did it. They got it done by the time they needed to get it done for certification. They did it. It checked out. The former president lost Georgia. Then there was another recount, and they had to announce for a third time that the president lost Georgia. He lost Georgia so many times, the thrill was gone. It was literally gone. So now they're doing a recount of Fulton County because, to quote Brad Raffensperger, who took a lot of heat, who supported Trump but was totally thrown under the bus. He's a Secretary of State. To quote him, apparently there's a history of mismanagement when it comes to elections in Fulton County. Yeah, okay. And so he fully supports this because it shows the voters that there's transparency. And I'm like, Brad, give it up. I don't think he's running for re-election, and rightfully so. I think he already knows that with these new Georgia laws, it doesn't matter. You can be on their side, but if you lose, all they're going to do is overthrow you anyway. So I don't think he's running anymore. I know the lieutenant governor who has gotten on TV multiple times and said, listen, I didn't like it. I hoped it wasn't so, but Trump lost and we need to move on because this is just counterproductive. He's also not running for re-election, so they'll probably put some super duper Trumpers into those roles who will do whatever Trump and the governor want them to do. Anyway, so they're having this audit of Fulton County votes. Ballots basically that they're focusing on will be the absentee ballots and whether or not there was fraud going on with those ballots. And it's like, didn't they scan all of those ballots before when they did the audit? Apparently they're looking to see if like some of those ballots were like not real or if they were illegitimate. And I'm just like, isn't it enough attacking the black folks? Like, haven't you had enough? Basically, what you're saying is Fulton County is known for mismanagement. It's mostly black county. There's mostly black voters. They're known for mismanagement. And we think that they defrauded the election process, the black people. Funny how none of this is happening in states where President Trump, at the time, former President Trump, won. It's none of the states that former president won. It's all of the states he lost. It's states in which others were on the ballots, other Republicans that won, that accept that they won, but not that the former president lost. It's like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Why are we spending the money? And you know what is even more ridiculous about this audit in Georgia? It's not going to change the results. That's not even the function of what the audit's going to do. So it's not like if it wasn't so, if the results change, like it's going to recall the list. It's not. So it's like, why? Republicans want you to move on from January 6th and everything, but they're continuing to rehash and relitigate the election. If you want to move on from all of it, let's move on. Let's accept that President Biden won fair and square. Donald Trump lost. And then he lied. And then he caused his followers to have a whole insurrection. And that's that. But there's no accountability. There's no telling of the truth. It's all just lie, and deny. It's wasting money. It's we can't move forward because Republicans are beholden to this continued lie. It's giving me like we are still in the shackles of a madman. That's what it's giving. And it's just so embarrassing. Especially when there's a very decent chance the former guy could be in jail soon. Like, if Letitia James has anything to do with it, this man will be convicted of crimes and thrown in jail. This week, Letitia James, not once but twice, said, I'm going to shake it up real quick. If there's a chance between no violence and violence, I'm choosing violence. And she basically let everybody know that she had informed the Trump organization that her investigation into them was no longer purely civil. It had moved into criminal territory. And baby, the timeline was jumping like Destiny's Child back in like the 2000s. What a time. Oh my God. When I tell you that the people were like partying in the streets, I don't party until I see handcuffs, but I did get quite a chuckle off of this. So basically, it's believed that whatever Letitia James has been looking into, she basically found enough information where she was like, listen, we're teetering on the edge of criminality. We're teetering on the edge of some fraudulent things have happened, and we need to get in line with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. So that's what they did. So at this point, she has been working with the Manhattan District Attorney, Cy Vance, his office. Now, here's the thing. We don't know at what point or how long ago it was that she and her office let the Trump organization know that they were being criminally investigated. Of course, the former president came out and said he didn't know anything about it. Witch hunt, witch hunt, witch hunt, more witch hunt. But that is what she told the world. I think it was like Monday night. And so basically she is now working with the Manhattan District Attorney, Cy Vance. They are looking into the criminality of the Trump organization, whether or not they actually like inflated assets so that they could get favorable loans and then turned around and deflated the value of other assets so they could like reduce their real estate tax. How they paid certain people, if you recall, Stormy Daniels received like a payout from the former president to basically like, it was hush money. It was like $300,000. Was that paid out by the Trump organization? Did they like get taxes on it? Like, how are they paying the people in the organization? This investigation has been going on since like 2019. Not to mention the investigation by Cy Vance. Not to mention that Cy Vance has millions of tax documents. Once the Supreme Court said, hey, like, you can't hold off on these documents anymore. They need to be sent to the district attorney. Like, he's going through millions of tax documents. And that would lead some people to believe that they now have the information that they need to basically ramp this up. It's very serious. Like, before it might have been a jokey joke, but like, this shows that things have gotten pretty serious for the president. Once again, I don't celebrate till there are handcuffs, because this man has been known to weasel in and out of accountability in any way that he can. So I don't celebrate it. I just chuckle at it. She also announced maybe like the next day that she's also doing a criminal investigation into the chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, which is interesting because I don't know if you guys recall, but earlier in the year, they contacted his daughter-in-law and they basically got like tons of information from her, like electronic devices and any of the paper records that she had. Baby, she brought that stuff down on the little hotel dolly and she wheeled it right. And she said, you want me to sit it over here or over there? Because wherever you want me to roll this stuff, baby, I got you. Take it all. And so she was on CNN and she spoke with Aaron Burnett out front. And Aaron basically asked her, like, how close is your ex-father-in-law to this? Like, and she basically said, listen, Donald Trump and the Trump organization are one and the same. And everything that's going on with the financials, my father-in-law for sure is involved in. They're all shady. They've been shady. And I sat there at the inauguration that day and could not believe how much power was being handed to basically such a shady man. She was like, if they knew the power they were putting in the hands of somebody so corrupt. Like, she said she couldn't believe it. And I was like, girl, welcome to white America. But anyways, when asked if she thought that her ex-father-in-law would turn on Trump, she said, absolutely. Absolutely. which I thought was interesting because I think they've been trying to go at Alan Weisselberg for a long time, and he's so far has been he has not cracked. He has remained loyal, but it appears that they're looking into his financials as well, including apparently him paying for like the tuitions of his grandchildren, and like if once again that was used for like if that was actually filed the correct way with taxes. First of all, I feel like I don't know enough about taxes because I didn't even know that was the thing, but apparently like once you do things like that, you have to file the correct taxes. Now, he should know that as a financial officer, but they're trying to determine if he did the correct things. And once again, we already know that Donald Trump feels like the less taxes you pay, the smarter you are. And if you're actually paying taxes, like, you know, a law-abiding citizen, that you're an idiot. And this system has been created for him to feel that way. Because once again, it benefits those with money and they get all of these loopholes. So it's like the point of all these investigations is determined if they were actual loopholes that he just took advantage of because of how the tax codes are written, or if there's legit fraud going on. Now, do I think there was some shady stuff going on? Absolutely. Do I think there was some loopholes that he probably took advantage of? Absolutely. But it's not up to me to get down to. It's up to Tish James and Cy Vance, who is not running for re-election. So I think he's got until about the end of this year or like, you know, early next year to get this report out. And many people think, of course, many legal scholars think that he probably has it close to being wrapped up and will have it wrapped up by the time he leaves, because it would be a very hefty case to try to pass on to someone. So they do believe that he's going to try and have this wrapped up, I think, by the end of the year. One can only hope, because I'm really tired of the saga. It's like, is he going to jail or is he not? We know that he's still facing a case in Georgia as it relates to how he might have meddled in that election investigation. I hope that leads us to Lindsey Graham, who called the I think it was the Secretary of State to talk to him about the election. Like, I hope that leads somewhere. But I think the last thing I saw was that the Fulton County District Attorney was getting some pushback. She was not getting the cooperation that she needed, which is just disgusting because anyways, speaking of cooperation, we talked about Matt Gaetz, and we talked about his former associate was likely to take a plea deal, and it happened. It happened on Monday. He accepted a plea and cooperation deal with investigators. He was originally on the hook for 33 charges. He will now plead guilty to 6 of them. They include PPP loan fraud, which like that's so last year. So like PPP loan fraud, sex with a minor, and then some more others. Now here's the thing. Once again, legal scholars are like, this is probably a big deal because Joel Greenberg is a scammer. He's a frauder. And they know that. And they know that he would be an easy witness to impeach because he's a scammer and a frauder. So if they have offered him a plea agreement and they have accepted any information that he's given them, it's likely that they are able to prove it. You can't just assume someone like Greenberg is going to be honest, because he's not an honest man. Once again, 33 original charges cut to 6. He's not an honest man. So, of course, a lot of legal scholars are like, listen, Joel Greenberg is cooperating and has been cooperating, and it's very likely that they have the information that they need. They're just trying to tie it all up. And then just yesterday, they announced that they have the cooperation of Matt Gaetz' ex-girlfriend, who he was dating around the time that he might have taken that trip to the Bahamas and had sexual encounters with the 17-year-old girl. So they're going to try to get all the information from her that they can get about the goings on around that time, which would once again be better for Joel Greenberg, because if Joel is telling one set of details and she can corroborate those details, then that's better for him, who has accepted a plea and a cooperation deal. It's not good for Matt Gaetz, but it's good for Joel in terms of his deal. What's also interesting is that, so there's an 86-page document in which basically they talk about, the deal that Greenberg has accepted. And in that document, it says Greenberg had sex with the minor. Greenberg also basically provided the minor to other individuals who were of age that had sex with her. So basically, the deal doesn't include names, which is kind of how Matt Gaetz in his office tried to spin it. Well, he's not named in it, but it's like you wouldn't name names, especially if they're public officials, especially when in America you're supposed to be presumed innocent before guilty. So you wouldn't necessarily name the names of individuals, and that may be why those names are not listed in that plea deal, and then that really might not be a good or bad thing for Gaetz, but it's probably not good. What would be interesting is if we saw a DeSantis on there, but we're not gonna speculate. So yeah, things are looking a little hairy for Matt Gaetz. I don't think that's gonna stop him from being Matt Gaetz though, because he is just a truly terrible individual. And he and Marjorie Taylor Greene just keep going across the nation being terrible people. So, I'd like to say best of luck to him, but I honestly don't have any well wishes to give to someone who allegedly had sex with a minor. Speaking of someone who had sex with a minor, the person who will be running against Liz Cheney has come out on his own accord and decided to let you all know that when he was 18, he had sex with a 14-year-old and he impregnated her. Just, so that when it comes out, he will have the upper hand. He didn't want anyone using that against him. He wanted to tell his own story. So this is Wyoming State Senator Anthony Bouchard. He basically wanted to get ahead of the news reports and share that information. The details of the story are quite interesting. It appears he was 18. I'm assuming he was still in high school, maybe not, but legal adult as far as the laws work in United States of America. He impregnated a 14-year-old. They got married, I guess, so he wouldn't go to jail for statutory rape. And she had the baby, of course. Then, unfortunately, he divorced her when she was of age, I guess, so he could dodge the bullet of going to jail. And then 2 years after that, unfortunately, she committed suicide. So here's the timeline. She gets pregnant at 14. A year later, they get married. She's 15. She comes of age to 18. He divorces her. And then 2 years later, at 20, unfortunately, she dies by suicide. And then he basically is like, well, I continue to raise the child. And I'm like, that's your son, right? You mean you continue to raise your son? Cool. Kudos to you, I guess. And apparently the son has some issues of his own. And he just like mentioned those, like kind of sped by them. And I'm just like, maybe his issue is that his father was a statutory rapist who married his mom so he wouldn't have to go to jail for being a statutory rapist, and then divorced her as soon as he could get rid of her, and then she committed suicide. Like, maybe that's part of his issues. But either way, this is who is being touted as the opponent against Liz Cheney, who was thrown out of her leadership position just last week because she does not ascribe to the big lie. And this is her opponent getting on Facebook Live telling everyone that it was a Romeo and Juliet story, but not realizing that Romeo dies. So, yeah, that's that. Shout out to the Republican Party for somehow always making it seem like the Democrats are the pedophiles, but then in turn having the pedophiles in their party and then also being lifted up into leadership. It's very interesting how they spun that. It's very interesting how QAnon continues to ignore the pedophiles in the Republican Party. It's very interesting how they never had anything to say about Roy Moore, who the former president endorsed. They haven't said anything about Matt Gaetz. They haven't said a thing about Anthony Bouchard, who impregnated a 14-year-old when he was 18. And they just continue to just not say anything about the former president, who has multiple cases for sexual harassment and also sex with minors. So, what can you do, What can you do? As the conflict in Israel and Palestine has reached a ceasefire, and hopefully at this time, because it changes hourly, there are no rockets being fired on both sides, which is good. I did see that there was some unrest on the ground. It looked like the Israeli soldiers were firing rubber bullets and stuff at individuals who were protesting. But right now, from my understanding, there are no rockets, which is, I guess, as good as we can get at the moment. The Israel and Palestine conflict is decades long and super complex, and I will not sit here and try to explain it because I'm not the best person for the job. Just understand that the Israel that we're talking about is not the one from the Bible. I know that can be confusing. I didn't have the full understanding of the history myself until a few years ago, but it's not the same one from the Bible. Basically, around 1948, the UK pretty much created, just on top of Palestinian land, Israel state, and was like, cool, settle here, but like didn't get any of the input from the actual Palestinians that live there. And over time, Israel has basically kind of just pushed Palestine out of their own land, and it's mostly become Israel. You can definitely Google it or go on any social media and look it up. There are pictures of basically how it started out with mostly Palestine and part of an Israel state, and it has branched out now to the point where the Palestinian state is just dispersed among land that is supposed to be Israel. It's a very sad situation over there. Of course, it's being exploited by terrorist groups, and then that leads to, Israel saying, well, we're just defending ourselves, even though they know that they are the far superior military power. They have, rockets and technology that can't at all be matched by Palestinians. Their military is elite. Like, we get military training from them. Like, that's how elite they are. So it's definitely not necessarily just a issue that can be boiled down to, well, they have a right to defend themselves. Unfortunately, Palestinian lives, civilian lives, and innocent children were killed, and so were, a few in Israel. However, the numbers are just super slanted. But that aside, this is not the chance, and this is not the time to start pushing anti-Semitism and just using this as an excuse for you to be an anti-Semite. Like, it's embarrassing. A lot of the Jewish people here in the United States, number one, don't consider Israel their home country. Some of them have never been. They don't know anything but the U.S. And it's kind of embarrassing when right-wing pundits try to say, is this how, are you okay with them doing this to your home country? And it's like, so are you saying that the United States is not their home country? That seems a little racist, but okay. But once again, a lot of the Jewish people here do not feel the same way. They do not support what's going on in Israel, and it's not okay. It's never okay to be racist or an anti-Semite, but especially right now. And it's not okay to use what's going on over there as an excuse for you to be a racist and an anti-Semite here in the United States. I mean, now violence against Jewish people has gone up like 438%. Like, come on. It's like every time something is going on in America, people who are racist and are bigots are just going to use that as a reason to hate even more. And that's so unnecessary. So I just wanted to say that regardless of how you feel about the conflict going on in the Middle East, that does not give you the right to be a bigot, a violent bigot at that. It's never okay. Anyways, thank you guys for listening to this week's episode of Did You Hear the News? Check me out here again next week. Thanks. Bye.